Suffice to say that I was never really a fan of Charlie Kirk. I liked his debate against Kyle Kulinski when he got Kyle to have a freak out over something he said, but aside from that, he was honestly too much of a Trump ass kisser for me to want to listen to him, and I prefer right-wing commentators who don't make it a part of their identity of being a Trump defender. With that said, though, Charlie did not deserve to get assassinated. His family especially did not deserve to lose him, but may he rest in peace. But I also wanted to get this video out of the way to get my thoughts out, even if it's kind of belated, about the reactions in the wake of him getting offed, both from the right and left, but mostly towards the left because they've generally been the most disgusting, at least the ones who have been outspoken about this anyways. I don't agree with the half of right-wing commentators who are advocating for fire and brimstone on the whole Democrat Party and the left, labeling them all as a terrorist organization or think they should be labeled as such and that they should all be stomped out. Advocating that Trump gets the National Guard involved in every major city and just martial law-esque kind of stuff in general. Regardless of whether Tyler Robinson is on the left or right, it would be an unjust action. Let's be real here, it's just one guy who killed another guy. The other guy being really popular, but still. This doesn't mean that some huge plurality of leftist and Democrat voters are going to start marching in the streets holding signs that say kill all conservatives and then start rioting to try and attain that goal. At that point, I can see a case being made for martial law or some other kind of heavy police action. That is, if the average gun-owning conservative citizen doesn't shoot them first, but we're not there yet. The fact this assassination happened and there are so many people praising it and even calling for more sets a bad precedent for that to possibly happen eventually, but keyword eventually. It hasn't started happening yet, and I don't advocate for premature government action. I think that all that needs to happen is already happening or is about to happen. Tyler Robinson is due to get the death penalty as soon as he can get caught anyways, as I think he should. He should be made into an example that violence over speech will not be tolerated. Certainly not when it gets to this extreme. And as far as leftists saying Kirk dying is a good thing or calling for the death of more of us on the right being punished, well, I might advocate for punishment towards those who call explicitly for more death, but I'm not there on the front of death praising specifically. But regardless, I don't even think that's necessary, because it's already being dealt with on the market side of things. Death praisers are getting fired by the thousands, and to that I say good. Don't know how I feel about right-wing internet personalities actively hunting for different leftist internet profiles' jobs and then reporting them to their jobs to spur along them getting fired, but I certainly don't feel bad for those leftists. Here, let me play the tiniest violin for you all guys. Kirk had a right to free speech. You do not have a right to employment, plain and simple. I will say that the mass vigils have been getting a bit creepy. One or two is fine, one of them being the funeral ceremony, but I've been seeing dozens of different examples of churches and sports stadiums holding vigils in his memory, and he ain't that worth it in my opinion. And this expectation I've seen granted only a couple of times, that churches should go out of their way and mention the Kirk assassination and hold a moment of silence, or else you should just leave your church, is extra retarded. If they hold a moment of silence, fine. If they make no mention at all, also fine. If they thank God in church that he was killed, then I'd say leave them, because that pastor's a psycho. The bare minimum standard should be that you have a neutral opinion at least, particularly if you didn't like the person in life. Not that you go out of your way to talk about Kirk and his assassination and honor him or whatever. And besides the very, very few who I've seen saying you should leave your church if they don't visualize Kirk, I don't think a majority of us is crying out that every Democrat voter speaks out. And if your opinion is one of don't care, then I think it's best you shut up, quite bluntly. If you're going out of your way to make a video, a post, or whatever that is purely just for the sake of saying I don't care that he died, well, that's not as bad as outright cheering on Kirk's death, but unless your intent is retorting to people who are falsely accusing you of cheering on his death, it seems in bad taste to me. That said, leftists couldn't even meet the standard of just having an I don't care kind of opinion. And it doesn't even matter if Tyler is a groiper or an Antifa guy, even though it seems more likely he was on the left, because too much of the left, regardless, are still praising his assassination. Kirk's assassination, I mean. I'm sure that in all reality, most leftists aren't happy that he died, nor calling for the death of more conservatives, and to be fair, I have seen Gabriel Iglesias and heard of a leftist commentator named Dean Withers who spoke out against his assassination and even said their leftist peers who do cheer it on are wrong, but that's the thing, too many leftists are cheering it on. This is the most I've seen of people praising an opponent's death ever. Even if it's just a minority of them, it's still the biggest minority I have ever seen. Bigger than when Trump was almost assassinated or when Rush Limbaugh died. You'd think that something like this would be a sobering moment for people. But no, just like the attempted Trump assassination, the successful Kirk assassination had the opposite effect. People became more bloodthirsty. They're like sharks. Once they catch a little whiff of blood, they want more. What's the absolutely most retarded thing to come out of the side of the Kirk grave tap dancers is this idea that conservatives are just mad at jokes. To those who unironically believe this, are you fucking brain dead? I'm sure there's some tiny segment of sensitive boomer grandmas who are saying you can't make any joke or meme whatsoever about Kirk's assassination ever, and I personally will admit that I've seen some legitimate jokes about it. Like, I've seen a meme where it's a picture of some informant leaning down to George Bush Jr.'s ear and the caption reads, "Sir, Charlie Kirk is trying to steal our holiday." That also ties in as a 9/11 joke because the assassination happened the day before the anniversary of the Twin Towers falling. That's a legitimate joke and is actually kind of funny in my opinion. And there are a couple others as well. But aside from that, no. What I've mostly been seeing is just leftists making serious arguments for why his death is a good thing or why other people should not be feeling bad for his death, and conservatives responding to those serious arguments from those leftists. And all these posts and memes that just sum up to "lol big head little face man dead" that you people are trying to pan off as just jokes. Where's the punchline? This doesn't come off as an actual attempt at a joke. It just looks like you find the idea of conservatives dying to be funny on its own. It's about as funny as a white guy walking up to a random black guy and dryly calling him the N-word. Hard R. It seems like a person is saying implicitly his death is a good thing, just like the example I made up seems like the guy is just wanting to be a racist. About those more serious arguments though, people saying he was against the word empathy, so therefore you shouldn't be feeling bad for him either. Even before I knew of the fuller context, I didn't think this meant he was against the idea of feeling bad for other people, which is like a super simplified definition of what empathy is. Just that he thinks something along the lines that the word empathy is overused and has been weaponized heavily in our modern society. And as somebody who has been in an argument with someone before who weaponized the word empathy against him, I somewhat sympathize with this belief. After looking at the fuller quote though, it looks even better for him, because he said at the back half of that quote that people should have compassion and sympathy. Say what you will if you think that he was being needlessly nitpicky about the usage of the word empathy. Don't twist his intentions to be more malicious than they actually are, damn it. The quote of him supposedly calling for the stoning of gay people, I don't know if anyone remembers this, but when I heard this, I instantly thought back at the one time that Nick Fuentes heckled one of Kirk's events and said, "What does sucking dick have to do with conservatism?" Showing that Kirk, unlike Fuentes, is for legally allowing gays to do what they want in the bedroom. And when I heard the Fuller referred to clip, it was even less damning than what leftists say. He was quoting an Old Testament verse to respond to Miss Rachel, who was saying that the Bible is pro-gay. Now, I wouldn't use the Old Covenant to try and say that Christianity nowadays still calls homosexuality a sin, and you can disagree with him calling it God's perfect law all you want, but it's still not an advocacy from Kirk that we in the United States go full Deuteronomy. That one quote where he supposedly says black women don't have any brain power to compare to white men. He didn't say that either, just that for certain black women didn't have the brain power to get their positions, per according to Snopes for fuck's sake. Now, I take umbrage with the fact he said at the end of his quote, "You deprived qualified white men from these positions." That was stupid and kind of race baity, and I doubt that he has evidence that they each directly deprived specifically individual white men from their appropriate positions. It's bad, but still not as bad as made out to be. But the one bit of argumentation being made against feeling bad for Kirk's death, or saying even that he deserved it because he supposedly said some gun deaths are necessary for preserving gun rights, should concern everyone, even the anarchists and libertarians of my audience and beyond. Disagree with Kirk all you want about everything else, but the one thing that we all have in common with him is that we all believe that guns should not be banned, despite there existing school shootings in this country. I listened to both the shortened down quote and the full statement he gave about guns. The fuller statement where he brought up cars as analogous to guns makes it all sound better. The argument that even though there exist tens of thousands of car-related deaths in this country, as tragic as they all are, we still find that as a doable trade-off for everyone in general society to have the freedom and flexibility of owning and driving their own personally owned vehicle. Left wing, right wing, and center. Although the issue of privately owned vehicles is slowly becoming a politicized issue too, I've seen. Charlie was just applying the same logic to guns. But that aside, even the shortened down quote doesn't sound that bad. He even used the word unfortunately to annotate that those gun deaths are terrible and unfortunate. That no innocent should die by the hands or gun of a crazed maniac. So I understood immediately what he was getting at. But the average leftist engaged in on the subject of Kirk and his assassination don't think so. They think that through twisting of words and the most uncharitable of interpretations that he said gun deaths are just fine and dandy. Forget about people wanting to hit anyone who they think are bigots. Forget about people wanting to hit anyone who thinks empathy is gay. No, it feels like the precedent is being set for people to start thinking it's okay to kill gun rights advocates, especially the more consistent ones. And that's the scariest thought of it all for me coming out of this nuclear level internet drama. I know that I can do my part in the future in telling people how stupid they are for saying that Kirk thinks gun deaths are fine, but if it isn't a matter of logical debate by any stretch of it, and it's only a matter of emotions, I don't know how the temperature can be turned down. I certainly don't think that I'm one to be able to do that. Sure, I'll keep on espousing all the usual hashtag not all Democrats kind of rhetoric that has been getting me in trouble with my right-wing compatriots ever since 2020, but as far as all the individual morons who think this is all about jokes or twist Kirk's words and the sick evil fucks who think he and more like him deserve to die, I'm not being nice to all of them. I'm too livid with how many psychopaths there exist who are openly saying his death is good and implying that more should die too. I just hope that every single one of them who has this attitude either A, fully and sincerely retracts their bullshit, or B, lose their jobs and become so impoverished and destitute that they can't afford cell phone service anymore. I mean, it's still a much better outcome than what a good chunk of them wish on us. And even more frustratingly, I had some former conservative friend decide to moral fag about me calling the people who think it's all just jokes dumbasses, gone so far to say, I have no respect for you. If your response to me calling objectively evil people names is that level of animosity, then fuck you. I don't want to be enemies with other conservatives, but alliances should be made of mutual respect, not one-way respect, especially when the thing that I did or said has no effect on you except maybe your feelings. And even then, to imply the notion that me cursing out a stranger or calling them names, a stranger who you don't even like or really care for, saying that hurt your feelings somehow is kind of a stretch too, for that matter. I think that's all I wanted to say about this though. I know that I'm kind of late to commentate on it, but there were just too many aspects to the Kirk assassination for me to leave it unspoken about. So here you are. Maybe it won't come to the worst of my pessimisms. Maybe gun control advocates won't go so far to resort to physical violence against those of us who are pro-2A. But I don't know. These people, or the minority of them that exist, just too many of them really think that we're all just heartless monsters who want or don't care that people die just because we want guns in order to protect ourselves and everyone else too, for that matter. And killing as stern of a gun rights advocate as Kirk felt like a rallying cry for some of them. Or at least that's how it feels for me when I see all these arguments twisting Kirk's words about gun rights in order to mockingly say that he would have thought his death was a worthy sacrifice for preserving gun rights. But one final thought, I don't think Kirk would want his death utilized as a wedge for taking away everyone else's guns and gun rights. And I believe that's the sentiment he was ultimately saying and would say if he had some way to communicate with us right now from heaven. Not that the act of killing him, any mass shooting victim, or anyone else is fine and dandy. But anyway, may God rest Charlie's soul and may God cool down the flames and protect us all from each other. And see y'all later.